Good evening. My friend is checking, so great with Mike. Good evening to everyone and welcome to Metro FM Talk. To all of the people that are catching us on the airwaves, welcome to Metro FM. And a big thank you to the team at Marawa Sports Worldwide for bringing to us the latest in the world of sports. And Robert Malawa was indeed correct. We've got a agenda-setting conversation that's happening this evening. And you might be wondering why do I sound like I'm in a booth or something like that? Well, I'm in a room, in an auditorium here at Auckland Park, at the public broadcaster, joined in an auditorium by some of our listeners and many of those who are industry actors, and not actors in the sense of, yes, you're staring or anything like that, but industry actors in the sense that all play a role in the value chain to varying degrees. And I'm going to be introducing them shortly, but safe to say we're having the kind of conversation that was precipitated by the comments you would have heard in that promo as we started our conversation from Mrs. Vati Swandaga, saying that there's an entire value chain here, and it seems that there isn't much transparency when it comes to how people relate to each other, how they relate to money, and how some of that money is shared within the industry, not mentioning, of course, the conditions of work and many other shop floor or firm level issues that we often discuss here on Metro FM Talk. So that's the conversation we're having now, and it's not just a talk shop. I want to maybe stress this as we start our conversation. It's not just a talk shop. We're going to be here right through to 10 p.m. and I think you could find many other better things to do with your time on this evening than just to sit here and talk, and then we can pat ourselves on the back and say, yeah, what a nice conversation, and then leave. But it's really about trying to find solutions to some of the issues that are facing the industry, and a lot of structural change is set to, I guess, disrupt how certain things happen in this industry. It might be distribution, which might shift the big role of some of the broadcasters. It might even be how some of that content gets to your consumer. It might be WhatsApp tomorrow. It might be all of these other innovations that are happening that are changing how content is consumed and who interacts with that content that the industry as a whole needs to respond to. And no better time than now to have that conversation. So welcome to everybody. And welcome to Metro FM Talk on this Thursday. We've got the second of these dialogues. Is Tandile, because the people at the top maybe are getting very good feedback about us having these dialogues. The last one we had was on gender-based violence, and certainly Indwe Dlumzi up in Mzansi Africa. And we're certainly paying attention to something that is also agenda setting now for us, which is how do we think about this creative economy? Now, as an economist, of course, I'd be remiss of me to maybe not talk about the macro picture slightly before we get into some of these issues. Very few policymakers really understand, I guess, the job-creating potential of the creative industry. A lot of them, I guess, pay lip service to it. But if you compare rand for rand, if you invest 1 million rand in the creative industry, you're likely to create, according to some of the modeling, 5 jobs, right? 4.9, so it's at least close to a fifth of a job. There are only the agricultural sector and maybe other sectors that are able to do that. Not even mining can get you those kind of jobs. And yet we're not investing as much as we should in this kind of industry to let alone solve our problems, but also to capture much of the global market for this. So that's the kind of conversation we're going to be picking up this evening. We're also going to be talking about some of the challenges that come with the disruption of the fourth industrial revolution for this industry. And more importantly, how do we resolve the issue of how value is distributed in this sector? And in so doing, try to regularize and maybe professionalize how professionals in this industry relate to each other. It might be the producers, it might be the broadcasters, it might even be the advertisers, it might even be the boom swinger right through to the talent that we see on our screens. That's the conversation we're having this evening. I've got a lot of guests who are here with me. And I think no better time than now to allow them to introduce themselves to all of us. I'm going to start on my far end there. I've got Libone Maema from the Independent Black Filmmakers Collective. And I'm going to ask all of our guests here, those who are with me here in front, and even those that are sitting in the front row that we've invited, as they introduce themselves, to also, I guess, briefly make some short remarks. And then we'll get to some of the issues that, I guess, have got us here. We wouldn't be having this conversation if something wasn't wrong in the industry. Libone?
Thank you very much, and greetings to all in the audience and at home. I am a proud member of the Independent Black Filmmakers Collective, a organization that was recently launched with a primary objective of really fast-tracking the transformation in this audiovisual industry that some of us have been part of for over 20 years and have been facing exactly the same challenges. We were here in the days of the Arts and Culture Task Team that wrote the white paper on arts and culture then. We were there when the NFVF was founded. We were there when SABC was Simunye. People have come and gone, and we are still here.
When it was we are
still faced with exactly the same challenges. And it is the challenges of ensuring better futures for ourselves as content creators across the value chain. And I think I'm proud to be part of this discussion in trying to find real resolutions, because we've been talking for a while, and we're here to, we are in a process of working together as stakeholders to really try and resolve this very important issue. Thank you.
Awesome stuff, awesome stuff. Let's pause there for a second. Before I bring in Renee from SABC Simunye, We Are One, or Vuga Africa, whichever tagline appeals to you, or whichever, I guess, historic moment you would prefer to start the conversation. And we are on radio still, so we still need to pay some of the bills. And I'd like us to maybe take a short break now and try and pay some of those bills. And when we come back, we are going to continue with the introductions here, just to set out the scene slightly for all of you who might not be here. And I'd also like the people in our audience to not feel like you are confined because you are on radio tonight. If you feel somebody is saying something that moves you, yeah, let's let those that aren't necessarily here also understand that I'm not here alone. It's not a phantom kind of experience that we're having here. So let's take that brief break, and when we come back, we continue with our introductions.
Budget is on a roll.
It is indeed, and we're here in an auditorium here at the Public Broadcaster in Auckland Park with me, Ayabonga Cawe. You tuned into Metro FM Talk. It's one of our dialogues, the second of which, and today we're casting our attention on the creative industry, or the creative economy more broadly, and we're going to be taking a look at some of the value relationships and the industry relationships that take root there. But we're still doing some intros, and at this point I'd like the General Manager for TV Content here at the Public Broadcast at the SABC, Renee Williams, to maybe, I guess, introduce herself to some of her guests here, I would assume, but also, I guess, she walked in earlier, just to give some of our listeners a sense. She walked in earlier, and she thought that she'd, look very inconspicuous there at the back. We had to bring you to the panel, Renee, because I guess a lot of the ire this evening might be cast in your direction. Good evening.
Good evening. Yeah, I am Renee Williams from Content. I was hoping that this would be an opportunity where I don't get too much ire. But that's okay. Like the actors in this room, I've acquired a thick skin. I can take a lot. We look forward to this engagement. I think for a number of years, our engagement happens on a level of ourselves, industry bodies. The only time we actually engage with our actors is when we rock up on set and we see our actors. And it's a good opportunity to hear from them. We do have a lot of processes. We are the SABC. But I think that we historically have gone a long way in trying to formalize an industry. We were responsible for formalizing it in the late 90s. We have fallen asleep. I think in a way we've given the reins over to the industry. I think the industry needs to get formalized without bodies like the SABC or Multichoice or ETV, because then you become independent outside of us. The rules that you exist in will not be made against our business models. It will be made against what the actors require or the performers require. And I think this is a good discussion to start. I take it we'll be discussing the Performers Amendment Bill too, which I
We'll
think
touch on that. We'll touch on that.
We'll go a long way in doing that. So, yes.
Okay. Adrian, where's the self-organization, man?
Here I am. My name is Adrian Galley. I'm here on behalf of Saga, the South African Guild of Thick-Skinned Actors. And as thick as our skins are, if you prick us, do we not bleed? Yeah. So the actors, as far as I'm concerned, are probably the most vulnerable people in that entire value chain for a number of reasons, which we'll get into just now. I did like your introduction about, are we professionalizing our industry? Because actors, the status of the actor in law is very uncertain. We are not classed as workers, because we are freelancers, we are considered to be self-employed.
Independent
Therefore,
contractors.
We are independent contractors. We are not covered by any of the provisions of the labor law, from the Basic Conditions of Employment Act to the Occupational Health and Safety Act. Sure, the Occupational Health and Safety Act happens without us, but every worker who is considered to be a worker has some input to make. In terms of Act 85, there's a shared responsibility for workplace safety. We rock up and just get told, do this, do that. If we see hazards, we have no power to step in and say, whoa, 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 let's have a look here. But there are a number of other issues that I'd like to get into as we move on. That's who we are.
And we'll certainly touch on some of those issues around occupational health and safety on sets while some of the content is being produced. Next up, Asanda Makaka, the spokesperson at the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture, and I guess also someone with familiarity with some of the issues that Adrian was speaking to.
Most definitely. Thank you very much for hosting the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture, former Department of Arts and Culture. I'm here to represent it in my capacity as the spokesperson for the Minister, Natim Tetwa. Ours is a department that is often misunderstood as to exactly what it exists for and what it does. But mine is a leadership. Mine is a leadership that does not believe in concealing difficulties, masking difficulties, and certainly not claiming any easy victories. I'm sorry for, just messing up that quote, Emil quote. But nonetheless, wow.
What's happening to our microphones?
Perhaps this is why.
You know when they don't want us to have a conversation like this?
No, this is why the department does. I suppose it gets a lot of flack because even when opportunities like these arise, the microphones don't work in order for us to get our messages across. And that is why people end up saying ours is a minister of condolences and miss everything else that he does. But really my presence here is to really just listen. I think you will have witnessed for yourselves that since the open letter was written last week, you experienced a minister who was almost immediately responsive in picking up the telephone and speaking to the artist in the form of Usiswati Swandaga. You would have seen that they had a meeting. So I'm here to represent that responsive department and to listen to exactly what will come out of this engagement.
Just briefly, Susan, I would think that there's been all manner of conversations. There's been a series of conversations over the years between your department and its previous incarnation.
Yes.
Why are we still here? 25 years.
Look, in time, hopefully you'll give me an opportunity just to ventilate some of what we consider to be key achievements that have been achieved by the department. I was listening to a conversation outside, gentlemen, where you said that for the first time in 2 weeks, we have spoken almost exclusively about the state of the arts.
That's Lebone there.
That Lebone said that. And I thought it's also an indictment on the press, the media, the news, in the treatment of any matters pertaining to arts, culture, heritage, and the treatment thereof as soft news, because the only time we seem to focus on it is if there's a controversy, whether an issue or around leadership and so on and so forth. So perhaps that should tell us that it's very important what has transpired, and finally we are having these conversations. But in due time, I will tell you about how in the last 19 years we've placed resources countrywide and have developed flagship projects in the form of festivals like Makufe, Mapungubwe. Of course, you would know our support when it comes to music. You would know which institutions we support. You would know about our agencies. So there really has been a lot of work being done. And also talking about professionalizing the sector, I do have the latest draft of the white paper, which actually does talk to some of those issues. So I'm glad that finally we're having these conversations and we can ventilate.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much also, Mampelele, for calling us out as the media, because I think also we've been sitting here thinking that our own role has been unproblematic in trying to center the conversations of a sector that I think all of us should be pulling our national efforts towards for the role that it plays in the curation of our culture and in moving our culture forward, but also, more importantly, as we go towards a fourth industrial revolution that is seemingly still unclear for us, is going to be a very important contributor and continues to be an important contributor to our economic fortunes. We're still on radio, so we're going to take a brief break now and going to continue slightly with our introductions there. As you would know, many of you would be familiar with our clock now, and we'll have much more free reign for flowing. Yeah.
Want to win your share of 20,000 Rand every week? It's no secret. Head to Engine now for their Big Blue Bonanza fuel promotion. Fill up with 400 Rand or more, and you could win one of two 10,000 Rand fuel vouchers every week. It's Engine's Big Blue Bonanza. 2 chances to win 10,000 Rand in
So guys, if the mic stops working at some point, just carry on talking.
T's and C's apply. Engine with us.
Shop Stewart's voice also.
It's the automatic choice. Like saying yes to that business class upgrade on your overseas flight.
Sure, Charles.
Than you'd expect with the Renault Kwid. For this month only, buy an automatic for the price of a manual.
This is Metro FM Talk with Ayabonga Cawe.
8 minutes it is before 8 p.m. in Padilindwazimnandi. We've got a dialogue here that we're bringing to you live with a live audience to tow, you know. I'm going Bishop Makam down a live audience, guys. Not is a live audience. And we're still continuing with our introductions as we start off. And right next to me, and we're going to move swiftly along when it comes to these introductions. But right next to me, I've got Neil Brunt. He's an independent producers organizations. One of the executives there sits on the board of the IPO. And you'll be familiar with that organization because a few weeks ago, I think, was it a few weeks ago? Or last week? I think last week. We had Sisanda Ayena from the IPO as well joining us in that conversation we had with Usis Vatiswa. Neil, evening to you, man. And it seems a lot of the producers catching flack, but I guess you can also kick the can down the road, can you?
You know, it's a pleasure to be here tonight. I think after the letter that caused all the trouble, what it's done is exposed a spotlight on the deep structural flaws that exist in our industry. And you know, the IPO that represents approximately 130 working producers in South Africa that produce probably a large percentage of the content that's made in South Africa, really needs to take responsibility for engaging in a discussion that is robust, that is honest, that is frank, because the fact of the matter is that, you know, I think there have been abuses that have happened, and there's no excuse for that whatsoever. Actors, writers, the entire crew are at the lifeblood of what producing is. And to disrespect that, I believe, and the IPO believes, is basically cutting off a nose to spite your face. There's absolutely no tolerance for that within the IPO. We don't represent every producer at all. But I think what I'd like to see out of this conversation tonight is to understand that we are right now in a moment of enormous opportunity, enormous risk in the global content industry. There's a massive shift in the way content gets commissioned and gets produced. The streamers that have come online, the whole distribution model has been upended in a way that really is very exciting, but also creates a lot of challenges. And South Africa is a small player, at the bottom of a global food chain. But the ramifications are being felt here as well. And I think the sooner that we can really engage all stakeholders constructively in a way that gives, you know, the entire production value chain the best chance of succeeding locally and internationally, the better we'll be able to create a situation where organized industry can really look after the interests of every single member on a set and create content that we're excited about, proud about, and most importantly, can travel globally.
Awesome. Zikwana?
Yes.
Do you have a microphone there? Let's make sure about a microphone. Unjan?
Di pretty? Unjan wena?
Yes. Put in the pretty. The right is gonna kondo man pato iflunja para kondo.
Introduce myself.
Yes, introduce yourself, and also I guess we're landing now. We're trying to locate ourselves in the conversation, and already there's a lot that's been said, so you can even engage some of the insights that others have already shared.
Well, my name is Zikwana Sotlaka. To everybody that lives under a rock, I have had thick skin for the past 14 years as a performing actress in South Africa. It's difficult, a conversation of this nature, because one finds herself in a position where she's not willing or wanting to engage, because there have been many of this nature, and great, robust English is thrown around, and little change the following day. Implementation is a thing that doesn't exist in South Africa when it comes to the arts, except for eating the billions of dollars that we make in this industry that goes to somebody I don't know. I return to a bunch of actors who implement and make sure this money is made by somebody and starve. Saga exists, but Saga can't really be recognized because there aren't really legislative anythings for them to respond to, as far as I'm concerned. How do you unionize an industry that doesn't belong to a thing that has a law? So who does Saga speak to? And then there's the IPO, and there's a bunch of producers, and I'm sure they take care of themselves, but guess Xhosa kuthiwa umqolo ungaphandle. Umqolo ungaphandle ke, I don't want to sound pessimistic, but this is the reality. I thirst for a day where we have this, but it is not the IPO and the Saga and the actors that come from events and sit down. I thirst for a day where the spokesperson of the sports, arts and culture is sitting, all ministers take off their jacket and sit down and say, so how do we shuko kalumba and make sure that the arts and culture, sports, arts and culture has money. I pray, you know, so we have, we sleep with wet eyes because we understand the contention of belonging to the industry that spits you out. The rot is sincere, and it can only be changed by creating the laws that make sure everybody evenly gets their bread. And then not just create it, because South Africa creates and doesn't implement, but doesn't just create, it implements. That's the industry that I want to belong to. I'm offended to go to any other country and call myself an artist, because they ask me of things that South Africa doesn't do. Because we are international. So earlier, so do you have a conversation with your producers maybe about a pair or like a share of the percentage? If you really make a show that's really great, Zikona, how does it work for you? I'm like, I don't know, just know the condolences to the winning Oscar winner, to the minister. That's all I know. I've never seen a day where anything has been implemented. I want to conclude. I just thirst for a day where I don't know which minister to point at for arts and culture. I don't know if you point at the Minister of Arts or the Minister of Sport or the Minister of Communication. Remember, I come from the Generation 16, so this is not new. I come from Generation 16. This is tennis, this is football. Big English, bye-bye in a week. I'm bored. Bored stiff. So that's why.
Yeah. Sisi Sasand, I think I saw you there jotting down, and we know there's a cabinet meeting coming up. We know there's a cabinet meeting coming up in the next few days. And I think what Zikona is asking for is a coordinated response on the part of all of the ministries that are charged with this thing. It might be your ministry, it might be the DTI, it might be communications, it might be even the National Treasury, which makes decisions on the purse strings. We'll come back to that issue. Keke? Good evening to you.
Hi, Aya, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I could be better. I really could be better. It's good evening to the panel as well, my fellow actors and actresses. It's rather difficult for me not to be very personal at this point in time. I have been through the most traumatizing time of my life. Very bittersweet. This was a personal attack, in all honesty. I have great, tremendous respect for the people that I worked for. And for me to be here today, to come and discuss and ask why, and they're not present to give me those answers, is very, very painful. My story is very deep. I don't know if you want me to touch base on it, but it's very deep. It's something...
Share as much as you'd like to share now.
Okay.
And in the context of understanding that we still have the next 2 hours for the conversation.
Lovely.
There's
no problem.
Don't worry.
Okay, no, so I worked for this production company, if I may say, Ferguson Films, for a period of 3 years, 2 different productions, wherein which I was a lead actress. My very last production, my understanding according to production laws set by them, is that we have an evaluation that takes place before you start shooting, ensuring that your actors are well within their health. That was taken. That was done late June, because we were supposed to start shooting the last week of June. That happened. We started shooting. All was well until the 18th of September last year, when I discovered that I was actually 17 weeks, 6 days pregnant. Thank you very much. Now, this came as a surprise to us because it was actually a pregnancy that had hid itself, mainly because I was on contraceptives. If I was on contraceptives and I've had a medical that was taken by you, which you get the results, you take my urine sample, you do this, you do that, and I come back to you after my next doctor's checkup and they're like, so hey, this is what's happening to you right now. You are then placed in mixed emotions as to whether, do you become happy about this or do you panic? What happens now? So the first thing that you do is you call up your agent. Call up your agent, speak to the production, let's set up a meeting and know what the way forward is. And that's exactly what was done. 2 days after I had explained to my agent about my situation, I received a call from my agent telling me that, no, Apparently, Shona Ferguson says, you're lying. He says you're lying, and your contract will be concluded by the end of October this month.
What are you lying about specifically?
I am lying about me being pregnant, me concealing my pregnancy. Apparently, I concealed the pregnancy.
So you were aware, according to his version?
According to him, I was aware, which I wasn't. And I'm like, I can bring my medical records if he needs them. I didn't know. And apart from that, we shot 6 weeks clearly after I'd conceived. If I'm 17 weeks and I'm only finding out on the 18th of September, that means that I fell pregnant before shooting. And that means I didn't know. And nor did they have record of it as well in the medical records that, hey, this is what's happening with your fellow actor. So I was baffled. I was highly pregnant. And it was during the saga when Umam Florence was busy in the parliament and I remember speaking to her. I went over to her place and she was like, you know what? We need to get this politically affiliated. I don't know how they found out about that conversation. 3 days down the line, Connie calls me and tells me that, no, don't worry. There's no such thing happening. My wife spoke up. My husband spoke out of turn. Calm down. Concentrate on your pregnancy. Enjoy it. It's a good time. Let it be. We will have a conversation about this. They probably just didn't know what's going to happen to your storyline, etc., etc. I have knowledge that a telenova can be switched. You know, it can be made to work, as opposed to a soapy that is a little bit more difficult. So with this being said, the 30th of October, I had a meeting with Shona Ferguson, as well as his showrunner, Lauren Nell, and my agent. Before this meeting transpired, I literally said a prayer. My mom's a bishop. So something in me said, say a prayer. I prayed, and immediately I heard a voice tell me, record your meeting that's about to happen right now. I put my phone on airplane mode, and I started recording. 28 minutes of Shona ensuring me that my job is safe. I will have my job after maternity. My maternity will be paid. This is the episode that you're going to exit on, episode 140. Come back on 170. We'll reel you in. It won't have to be anything drastic. You know, just slowly come into phase, and we'll see how we work around this. December the 7th, after having 2 other meetings with him, which unfortunately I was too relaxed after the first meeting, you know, for me to say, okay, no, let me record these ones as well with my fellow colleagues. We were ensured that we're going to shoot until end of contract. End of contract is April 2019. From June last year to 2019, April. I get told on the 7th of December, 12:57 p.m. I remember the time exactly, under 3 minutes, by Lauren, the showrunner, while Shona's in the other room in this meeting, telling me that, no, we can't do much about your character anymore. Excuse me? No, it's not working anymore. Our writers are blocked. AB, so you've used my pregnancy. You've scanned my child on the set without my knowledge. Your synopsis had no intake about me having a scan by a non-professional. You're going to get an extra to come and scan my unborn child. You're making my child a prop at this point in time. And then when you decide that you're going to cut out this scene and not use it for television, Lord knows why, you do not even have the audacity to come back and say, I am sorry. We did you wrong. You carry on, carry on, carry on. You wait for the last week of shoot in December for you to come and tell me under 3 minutes how you are dismissing me and that courtesy will be you paying me until the end of February, whereas my contract ends end of April, if not May.
Keke, I want us to pause at that point, because I think you've painted a perfect synopsis of your own story. And I think as we have the conversation, we're going to see key parts of not only your story, but the story that Uvatusa was raising.
Yes.
In how we paint this picture of what's happening in the industry and some of the power relationships that are there. Mutlat, who's it, my brother?
Shav, how are you doing?
Sure. Good, thanks, man. Good,
Awesome.
good.
My name is Motlatsi Mafati. I'm an actor. I'm also an aspiring director. I've studied film. And you see, this industry is a dog-eat-dog type of situation. And right now, I think an hour ago, I got a friend who went to Brazil. So in the flight, they had, you can watch films there. So I've got 2 films that are there, right? There's one, Love Lives Here, and there's Droplets, which I was also part of. I'll tell you now, I'm not getting anything from it.
Mm.
Right? This long time ago, I found myself I was in Argentina, and then this lady who was there, she made a hoo-ha about like, yo, do you know who this person is? Right? We watch you all the time. We really love that show. Right?
In Argentina?
Yeah. And then...
So
and then
they have a Mutlatsi there who's speaking Espanol.
Right? And then I saw a clip of my scene on the socials speaking French, right? So it's dubbed. Now, I don't know about that, right? I don't know that in other countries, people watch me and what I do, and I'm not getting a cent from it. And I understand that we need to fix this. We've been talking about it for a very long time, you know, and at some point it needs to stop.
Mm.
It needs to be fair. And I do understand that producers have to benefit, and the broadcaster they also have to benefit. Everybody has to benefit. We need to be fair. I'll give you a scenario. There was a point when we spoke about royalties, and I mean, I've been in this show for quite some time. Now, I got a letter from the broadcaster for royalties. I think I had 6 years in the show at the time. And the money was, I was like, oh, finally, maybe I'll get something, right? And I got $1,000.
After 6 years?
Yeah. Then I'm like, hold on. There's a problem there. I got $1,000. So now we fight for these royalties. We want them, right? No, this thing needs to get regulated. And then, okay, we get it. But when it comes back, it's 1,000, right? So I've spent my entire life, I've got kids. Are they going to live on $1,000? So that's my issue. We'll fight for these things. But at the end of it, it's going to be peanuts that we get. Okay, let's move away from it. Now, I mean, there's billboards everywhere. People go, oh man, you're so amazing. We love you, and people watch you, and wada. They celebrate you. But then you're not getting anything from that image that's there on the billboard. Mama will be proud. My boy has made it. But there's nothing that can... I got a call from a magazine that wanted to do a cover about my life and my children and my wife. That's personal issues, right? So they're gonna put me on the on the front page and sell the magazine. I'm not getting anything from that. At all.
I want us to pause there on that point layer magazine, because we want to take a brief break. When we come back, I want you to complete the point you were making.
Sharp.
To all you dreamers, seekers, and
It is indeed tuned into Metro FM Talk. We're having a dialogue about the creative economy. This on the back of that open letter that Vatiswandacha sent to the Minister of Sports, Recreation and Arts and Culture, and it certainly has emboldened many others to ventilate their own stories. And it's, I must add, not the first that we hear of some of the exploitation within the industry, the dissatisfaction many actors and others in the industry have with the power relations within the industry. Mutlatsa, you were still explaining being on a billboard, being on a show in Argentina, being on the cover of a magazine, and zonke baba, no money.
Nothing. So I think who's fooling who here? Somebody knows something.
Because somebody's making the money.
Right?
Someone's making money.
Or maybe we don't understand how it works. And I'm just hoping that as we're talking about these things, we need to resolve them. Because we'll forever be, the department will find itself still being called the Department of Condolences. Do you understand? And we want a better future. We want to live off this. We're very passionate about it. We spent, I remember I was driving a TES for 7 years, being on a Soapy, and people laugh at me when I'm driving the robots. That thing is hard, right? Because, you can't afford a house. The bank won't recognize you. So we're just asking for people to care, those who are in charge. Now, because nobody cares or we're not regulated, other industries now, they're ripping us off. That's why the magazines are also playing their part. So, I'm just wondering, how are we going to solve this? And I do understand that everybody needs to make money. I think producers are under pressure because the broadcasters probably, they set the tone. And because there's no regulation, so no one can say anything. But then one way or the other, somebody is hiding through this. So we want to solve it. We don't want to, we don't want people to we don't want actors to be scared. We want to have an open space. And I don't speak on behalf of actors alone. Even the crew, I think for them it's even worse. Right? And one other thing, we need to unite as actors. If there's a body that can protect us, or we can speak as one, then let's go there. So now people are acting in isolation. That will never help us.
And of course, it's easier to, rip you off and out-negotiate you if you're working alone. So, I think what Mutlatsa is raising is the issue we spoke about a few days ago, which is, it seems here there's no open cards. It seems, you go to every other sector in the economy, and if there's a, AMCU negotiating with Neil Froneman and Sibanye Stillwater in the platinum sector, they're all looking at the same base of information. We're all looking at the same platinum prices. We're looking at the same books of the company. We're looking at the same, port charges that these guys are paying. All of their costs are being presented in the same way, and therefore we can negotiate on that basis. That's not happening here.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Vatiswandacha. I wrote the letter.
It's like, that's me. That's me.
Right spelling and good grammar.
Out of pain and frustration. Someone asked me last week in one of the interviews, how do you feel? And I realized at that moment, I was free. For a very long time, I carried a lot of anger, a lot of pain, a lot of humiliation. And after the letter went out, I was at a point of, I don't care. But people are going to know. When you walk in the mall and people come to take pictures, you give a very negative energy because it's like, you don't know what I'm going through. I don't feel like taking a picture today because I don't have food in the house. So, I'm free. And I'm waiting for the day that we can sit with the people that can be answerable to everybody, from the CEOs of the broadcasters, so we can have an open discussion and really get to understand who's fooling who. Because everybody else, producers are going to think that we are hitting hard at them because they're the direct link. And we don't know what the processes are. When we are told that, when we're told that budgets have been cut, and then you speak to the broadcast and they say, we never cut budgets, then you know there's something wrong. So that conversation needs to happen for us to really understand how these contracts are awarded, what really goes on, why am I getting less every year? They need to explain to us so we understand. So there's a lot that needs to be done.
Okay.
There's definitely a lot that needs, and can I just add what he's talking about when he was driving a Taz? That's very painful. I think a lot of things are not taken into consideration of what the actor goes through. It's a psychological and emotional draining process because people see you on screen, there are expectations, and you can't blame people for that. It's a nature of the beast. That's what we work for people to have perceptions about us. And then because we're so vulnerable, people can say whatever they want to say. I can't believe you've been acting so long and you're driving this old car. What's wrong with you?
Renee?
So, yeah.
Budgets. I want to start with you, and I'll come to Asanda after you. This issue of the budgets. It seems there's this issue of transparency, and I want you to maybe start touching on it. We'll go to an ad break, but you'll continue thereafter. A lot of the actors are saying, you know, Channel comes and says, yeah, we paid the money over. And the producers then are stuck in a rut. Or it works the other way. Producers say, look, we're getting squeezed by a channel. We can't really do anything. Just maybe paint a picture for some of us who might not be familiar with how that relationship between the producers and the broadcasters happens. How does negotiation happen? What kind of safeguards do you guys put in place so that you don't end up having to take the can? No? Oh, okay. Let's take the break. Maybe let's take the break so that it's nice, because now I've prepared you for the entire question. You can even scribble notes. Okay, cool. So when we come back, and then I'll come to you, Sasanda, about one of the big demands in Vatiswa's letter, which is this multi-stakeholder dialogue. What's the role of government's convening power in making sure that that happens? But the lady from SABC TV content has said, go to the break. That pays the bills. Go to the break.
Hey, does your bank really help stretch your money?
it's where you're at. See Chopper Metro FM Talk. That being said, I was complaining now to the guy who's doing the photography here. Why don't you tell us we're on IGTV? So if you are on the gram, on Instagram, go to Metro FM SA there. You'll get to see the link to the live YouTube stream for this conversation. You'll also get to see some very nice videos here of all of the beautiful people we have in this auditorium that are joining us for this conversation. Metro FM SA on the Instagrams there, and please feel free to continue to share some of your tweets there on @MetroFMSA. I'll take a look at some of them. They're coming in thick and fast, and we'll get an opportunity to take a look at those. You can also go to our Facebook page there on Metro FM. Now, Renee, on that cliffhanger, on that cliffhanger, Renee, I guess I posed the question before the break, but just maybe paint a picture for us of how that relationship works.
If you'll just indulge me.
Sure.
I'd like to go to 1993. I was very young then. So I'm using history, not because I was in that times. The SABC went through a change when the ANC took over. And under the new leadership, the SABC had to figure out how it was going to address historical issues. I know a lot of people in this room probably, if you were actors and you are actors and actresses, maybe you have aunts, uncles that were in the industry in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, and you all knew what happened to them. And we had to find a way to equalize and balance the industry. There was an organization under COSATU set up at that point called Cawe. If any of you have signed an SABC freelance artist agreement, you would have seen it mentions Cawe. Cawe was the Performers Workers Arts, and it fell under COSATU. And it looked at all the entire performers industry, mainly with the focus of trying to create equity and fairness and transparency that was happening in the industry at that point. They engaged with the SABC management between 1993 and 1998. That contract that everybody refers to was developed between all the parties and was put in place. Two main issues were addressed in that. One was conditions that were happening on set in terms of health, safety, nudity, working hours. And then the other big issue was royalties. So the royalties issue and the repeat fees issue was put in place because we had a situation where we had black actors from the 80s that took part in films and got paid 100 Rand. If you were working on Mziniwes and Sizwe Series 1, you would get paid very little money. And we were showing these shows over and over and over. So how do we begin to benefit them? And that's why that contract was created. And to your point, within that contract, there's two clauses. Clause 5 is the repeat clause. Clause 7 is the exploitation clause. Repeat means that when we repeat a show, a drama series, on any of the SABC platforms, actors, writers will get repeat fees. They set out, I think, the actors get 25% in prime and 15% outside of prime. That would be mainly for actors that are not in soaps. The reason we don't do soaps is because it will get very costly. On average, I spend almost 2 million Rand a month paying repeat fees. Because of the financial situation over the last 2 years, that's obviously escalated.
Does that still happen with Encore now?
No, so I'll get there. Patience. Okay. Where was I? See, you've taken off my
Oh, no, man.
Yes, we spend
2 million.
We spend on average 2 million Rand. It has benefited a lot of our actors that have come through the 70s, 80s, and 90s. I can tell you there's some actors that we pay 600,000 Rand to a month in repeat fees. At the moment, we're showing Streaks. We've probably shown Mzizi with Nsizwe to death. And I think Shaka Zulu. We also, the repeat fees moves over to the family, to the deceased estate. So it doesn't end with just the actor. You can claim directly with the SABC. You do not need to go through the production company. We also recognize a lot of our actors find themselves in an unfortunate situation. They don't always get copies of their contracts. So we have a process in place that allows you to claim without it. The second clause is clause 7, which is exploitation, very different to repeat fees. Exploitation is a recognition of rights. That recognition mainly lies with the creation and the creator, and that resides, the initial resides with the producer. The producer gets, when we sell a program, he will get 15%, is it Neil? I think it's 15% net after we take off our cost. The writer will get 10. The actor is a negotiated fee or 2%. And it generally depends, I'm assuming you're referring to your soap. On a soap, the cast is big. The principal cast is big, so that fee is divided equitably amongst them. An industry can only be viable, rights only work, commercialization only work, if we have an economically structured industry. The SABC's focus when we do content is not commercialization. It's meeting our mandate and it's addressing our audience. Our audience prefers very culturally relevant content. That means that that content doesn't travel that well. It travels to third world countries. Generation sells in Jamaica. It's our biggest market for Generations. When I sell Generations to Jamaica, they have no money. An entire series of 260 episodes of Generations is probably going to, I'm going to get about 120 US dollars an episode. That's what they can afford. That money comes in, I need to take it off and pay my expenses and then distribute equitably. So that's how that works.
So in that case, if it's repeat, so you're selling something you've already produced.
Yes.
When you pay your expenses, what would those expenses be?
So it's travel. So when I go and I meet in a market to go and sell, the travel costs. Also, you guys know that we are quite behind technically. So we generally have to prepare our content for international sales. We have to do M&E tracks. We do dubbing. Fortunately, when we do the French territories, they dub themselves. We have to do dubbing scripts. So there are all these costs that are involved in it. But it's capped. So the international standard is 35%. So we cap it at 35% anyway. It will not exceed that. You do have every right to ask for that information. We do make it available, that this production was sold in this territory. Mostly producers come and ask us for that information. We'll tell them that the show was sold in this territory. This is the fee. Exploitation works on the fee that you sell the program on. Repeat fees is on how much you got paid. So if you got paid 150,000 Rand for your show, it's 25% of that in prime, 15% outside every time it gets repeated, unless you're a soap. Because, I mean, we are in financial situation. When the SABC sneezes, everybody catches a cold. I'm hoping that this conversation takes it away from just the SABC, because the industry cannot survive just on the SABC. We've seen what's happened in the last 2 years. The standard contract has been taken by producers and other broadcasters and adjusted for their means. They can do that, but we don't control the terms and conditions of what happens in an industry. We need to create an environment where there is a bargaining unit. You don't need to belong to the Labor Relations Act to have rules and to have regulations. The fact that a producer pulls you out and tells you to go for a pregnancy test and for urine samples, that's just like shocking. It goes against, you're very unconstitutional. As content, I get aware of this when it comes to me. I've had one situation like this in the last 2 years in terms of pregnancy, where a particular production company, it wasn't an actress in a drama series, it was a presenter on a magazine show, and they wanted to remove her because they didn't have time to wait for her to come back from her pregnancy, was their thing. I intervened and said, even though you are a freelancer, you still fall under the laws of the country. And we did delay the transmission of the second 13 episodes. We do have those avenues within the SABC, but I think that it shouldn't be reliable on whether you can get Renee in her office or phone Renee.
So Renee, just briefly, I mean, what other levers do you have in your relationship or negotiating relationship with producers that allow you to say, I'm not going to work with you, you're not going to get this budget unless you've got proper conditions of work and you can prove that?
I mean, I think between Lebona and Neil, they will take you through that, but our contract allows that. We've got a standard commissioning agreement, and we've got the freelance artist agreement. It's attached to all our contracts. It sets out the terms. We're talking about infringement.
Sure.
When there's an infringement, managing infringements has to happen within a bargaining space. It cannot happen on an individual basis. Otherwise, I would spend 99% of my time meeting with people, trying to establish, is this happening? And we need to create that. The industry is very fragmented. I've been in the SABC for 10 years. Every year, I redo, and I feel you, because I'm like that. Every year, we meet with people, we have sessions, terms of trade are done, this is done, that is done. Next year, there's new people.
Renee, let's pause there for a second. I want to bring in Asanda, and I'll come back to you, Adrian. Asanda, one would think that there's a role for the government here in playing, some convening function in trying to get the different parties together to some collective bargaining platform. But I was saying to you earlier on, I know of no industry that has been organized by the government. But one would think that there is some role that the government can play in convening the different actors and trying to build greater organization here. In what we've tried, as you said earlier on, maybe the implementation hasn't been so good.
Look, Ayabonga, I have to go back to what I said in my opening remarks when I said that the Department of Arts and Culture, now known as Sports, Arts and Culture, is one of the most misunderstood departments. And I'm picking up on the statement made by Zikona to say that the department, has money and should really be active and visible in these fights. The department looks after 9 sectors. These sectors include celebrations and performance. That would be your music, performance arts. It looks at visual arts and crafts, multimedia, heritage, technical services, arts administration, literary arts, gaming, architecture, and designs. That already tells you that there is a vast amount of work that is not limited to performance or television or film. In this year's budget speech, the Minister of Finance actually announced, which was something we celebrated, because National Treasury said that the department will consider proposals for the development of a new National Theatre, museum, and consider financial support for the National Archives, a National Orchestra, and a ballet troupe. I'm mentioning this background information because when we have the discussions we have here today, we tend to misattribute the criticism. It is true that the Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture, actors, artists would be his stakeholders. But unfortunately, the broadcasters with whom these producers work and have a wonderful working relationship, it seems to me, they fall under the Department of Communications, now known as Communications and Digital Technologies. When we talk about drafting legislation, the Copyright Amendment Bill, that would have been originated
from the DTI.
From DTI. Yeah. So do we understand that the Department of Arts and Culture, the responsibility it has to performers is really that far? But let me go back to what you were asking about how these departments work together. As far back as 2013, if we're talking specifically about these bills, that's when the Interdepartmental Committee was formulated. It would have involved participants from all of these departments. The Department of Arts and Culture, and Minister Mteto in particular, when he went to present to the Portfolio Committee of the DTI, because remember I said, his are the stakeholders, but the legislation pertains to a different department. So the submissions were made on behalf of his stakeholders. So what do I mean by that? The bills that have been passed by National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces currently have, deal with issues like the introduction of guidelines for contractual engagement, introduction of clear rules on commissioned work, share in royalties regarding audiovisual works, revision of the definition of collecting societies, oversight on the administration of rights, firm rules when it comes to the collection of royalties.
Who enforces that?
Remember,
whose job is it?
Remember,
maybe that's what I must ask. Whose job is it to enforce?
Bills that have been passed by the NA and the NCOP that are currently awaiting assent by the President of the Republic.
So I'm saying, Mampela, in the context where maybe the bills would be passed.
This would be what the Department of Arts and Culture and the Minister of Arts and Culture would have advocated for, so that whatever the legal language in those bills does not forget that there are people in the form of these stakeholders. And I can't...
So the question I'm asking, Sasanda, is if the bill, so the President signs off on the final bill, comes from the NCOP and the National Assembly, sign off on the final bill. If it is passed into law, there's some regulatory framework that has to be then built to say, here is the right, and here is the person who would enforce or monitor if this right is given effect to. In how you've advocated, I guess, for these particular things, who do you envisage playing that function?
It would have to be a multi-departmental function again, because remember I said as far back as 2013, in recognition that these bills talk to different people and stakeholders who do not necessarily fall as stakeholders of one department.
I see. Okay.
So again, it would take these multi-departmental approach to ensure enforcement. But I need to talk to this issue of, you asked before the ad break, is the possibility of a multi-stakeholder dialogue.
Sure. Which is the big demand from Vatiswa's letter, yes.
So I will not go into what the minister and Ms. Ndaga had their time, and she will know what was said in there. It was not a matter of public consumption, but really in recognition that when someone of a stature speaks, it's not only bold or brave or courageous, but also, you can also describe it as a somewhat kamikaze act. She really did something that a lot of us, and I'm talking about not in this particular industry, in any industry, if you try to be the hero the way she has done, you can be sacrificed.
Let's pause there. I need to take a quick break, and we'll come back and allow you to conclude the point that you're making. Adrian, I'll take your view, and then I'll come to you, and I'll then come back to you, Neil, as well. And this is Vatiswa Uvile tu kamikaze pilot. Uvile, kagchomna. Let's take this brief break.
Catch Afternoon Express weekdays at 5 p.m. on
on the IGTV. Check us out there on Instagram, Metro FM SA. You can also check out our conversation and track it, of course, on Twitter. And some of the tweets that are coming through, I'll take a look at. But before we went to the break, Asanda Makaka, you were concluding. Yes.
Yes. You know, around the multi-stakeholder dialogue, I think that in these discussions, we really forget that the policymakers in this country and the legislators of this country have done the best that they can, because legislation doesn't pass in the National Assembly and the NCOP, and that doesn't say that your leaders clearly see what you see. So the multi-stakeholder dialogue that would take place would be one that would be after the president has exercised his prerogative. Because what are we discussing now? We have legislation that has gone through both houses of parliament, and now we are waiting a signature. And the president has every right, by the way, to exercise his prerogative. And also, I do pay attention, close attention to the debates about what is taking him so long. And again, as I said about the department and these sectors, it's the president of a country. There's issues around the economy, the security cluster. We know what's happening in our country. Can we give the president his prerogative to actually do what he needs to do? And lastly, I cannot not mention this.
Briefly,
very briefly. It bothers me somewhat, you know, when the criticism sometimes, and I did say to you that, look, sometimes we don't go out of our way to get coverage for things that get done. But when it comes to the stakeholders of the Department of Arts and Culture, Sports, Arts and Culture, as far as possible, they are taken care of. Last year, or early this year, an email comes from a cast of a show on the other broadcaster. They would like to be entered into the international Emmys. The producers.
Oh, the program, yeah? Okay.
I'm not mentioning names. I'm not mentioning names, but the cry was, I watched this program. It was one of the most excellent
And you thought it was worth an Emmy?
No, I would, as a person, an individual, think any broadcaster or production company would enter this thing, this amazing production, into the international Emmys. But the producers refused. The channel, because they did own, agreed, but then they said, we don't have the money. The letter came to the Minister of Arts and Culture, then, Natim Tetwa. Who paid for that? $2,800. Zikona, you were on the list of those names of actors. So I think that any time we want to criticize, we have to remember that with the limit, if you look at all the departments and the budget allocations they get, arts and culture is not the richest. But within the limited funds that we have in all the sectors that we have serviced, the best is being done.
I think you've even spoken for Tito there now. Adrian, Asanda saying they got skin in the game. But I guess the big issue is also about self-organization. And I hear the point that, you know, wait for the president to sign off on the bill and then maybe you'll have a multi-stakeholder dialogue there. But I get a sense from the conversation we've been having here that there's also an industry dialogue that needs to happen without government.
I'd like to pick up on what Renee said about we don't need to have legislation to enable us to have collective discussions. Unfortunately, that is not the case. Our experience is that as soon as we do engage in some kind of a collective bargaining situation, the Competition Commission comes down on us for fixing prices behind closed doors among select stakeholders. Yes, indeed, because we're independent contractors. So we're not empowered by labor legislation to even have collective bargaining. So what I'm saying is that we need to appeal to all the various ministries for this interdepartmental approach to empower us and to create an enabling environment, you know, so that if we could have a sectoral determination from the Department of Labor that says that artists are atypical workers, in that they work for themselves, they are often between jobs, they don't have regular jobs, they don't have a single employer. And they need to be catered for. They need to be afforded some of the rights that the average worker enjoys. So that when a maternity issue, a human rights abuse happens, there is a forum to go to.
But Adrian, I mean, I've heard from people that there are, at some point there were sectoral determinations within the Department of Labor on minimum wages for, performance workers or, people working in the performance space. But I guess it goes back to the same issue of,
I haven't seen
who
those.
enforces it.
No. And Renee also mentioned PAWE, the Performing Arts Workers Equity, who existed as a union under COSATU in the days of the previous labor regime, where independent contractors weren't shoved out to the periphery, because today Saga cannot register as a union. That is why we're a professional guild, like a union, but with none of the teeth.
Maybe we need the labor registrar here. Lebone, let me come to you quickly, my brother, before we get to the break, and I'll allow you an opportunity to speak before and after the break. But what do you make of some of the conversations that we're having here? And also, I want you to speak having put on the hat at some point of, a similar role to what Renee does as well.
Okay, no, I think I find myself in a bit of a peculiar situation here, because I started out in my career as a distributor, and distribution was more really around exploiting other people's rights to content, right? So my job was to go and buy rights, to clear all of those rights, and then to monetize. But most importantly, it was to go and find the audiences for that kind of content, and it was for a specifically different kind of content that I was focusing on. We were the first team of people to sell specifically Pan-African content to SABC. We used to be part of a company called the Film Resource Unit. And we were schooled from a school of thought that says that you need to own your content. We worked with filmmakers from the 60s, whether they were African filmmakers from Mali, from Senegal, and they did not own their content. And that same principle of saying, as a producer, you therefore need to own your content. When I moved into a broadcasting space.
Let's do this. Let's pause. When we come back, you'll start us off as you move into the broadcasting space, right? Because I think you make an interesting point around shifting from being a producer of the content and fighting for claim to your work, and then, of course, sitting now and wearing the other hat where you need to maybe reduce costs somewhat to be able to get a nice margin for the channel. Let's take this brief break.
If some freak weather causes damage...
This is Metro FM Talk with Ayabonga Cawe.
It is indeed, and you tuned in to Metro FM Talk here this evening. 5 minutes it is, just before 9 p.m. We continue with our conversation, eating a little bit of the man with the music's time this evening. So Sentle is not going to be with you from 9 to midnight this evening, but he's going to be with you from 10 to midnight. That being said, we continue with our conversation here, bringing to you a dialogue on the world of the creative economy, film, art, television, and all manner of other work that has seemingly become a lot more precarious for people in that value chain. And Lebone, you were speaking earlier about, as producers, this impulse to want to own your content because you understand that, you know, this content is going to be reproduced and replayed multiple times while you're alive and even when you're gone.
One step back. So I was still speaking as a distributor. So in the principle of buying other people's content, right, aggregating that content and then on-selling it, right? So that's just a process of understanding the chain of title. Like who owns who needs to be paid, how do you pay the filmmaker, will the filmmaker pay? And we're dealing here, and I'm being specific, with African filmmakers, because I want to go into the global context as well, right? So I move from being a distributor and understanding how content is bought and sold, and I join a broadcaster. A broadcaster works on totally different principles. The broadcaster works on the current principle of the current Copyright Act, where it is the principle of whoever pays owns, today and in perpetuity and on any other media that will ever exist, right? And there's a difference in the nature of broadcasters and broadcasters that are licensed in South Africa. The SABC works on different regulations. The commercial broadcasters work on different principles. I just so happened to start a channel for a commercial broadcaster. And the principles there are completely different. So what I think I'm really trying to allude to was the opportunity to, as an executive, change business models. When we walked into Randbeck in 2010, the group that I'm referring to did not own black audiences. They did not own black talent. The Fergusons were not existent as a company. And this issue that I had grown up with of ownership, of transferring that ownership, had to be translated in the change of the contract that we're going to enter with this new supplier that this broadcaster had never worked with. So we had to innovate. We had to say, the business works on multiple windows. Which window of rights do we open for the producer of this content, and which specific genre? There was this thing that all of a sudden didn't exist, and it became Zanzibar Scope, and all of these people started making these low-budget movies. The only window of rights that we could open was for DVD rights, right? Because that window was going to die very soon, honestly, right? So that's the window that was open. But all of the other broadcasters never really moved on that ownership. When you get to the VOD, etc., none of them moved. And then I go then, just to skip forward, what we do is that we influence the business model by saying, there are no telenovelas in South Africa. We have soapies and we have drama. So let's create a different business model here, right? Where people have been working and as actors or as crew, and they get a call rate for once a week or twice and 3 times in a month, and it's just 1,000 rand, right? So let me give you 15,000 rand a month at least, 30,000 rand a month, and then you come and work for me for a month, but I hire you for 9 months. Through that process of the change of that model, what we ended up seeing was, we ended up as producers seeing people starting to work. We ended up people starting to have some sort of consistency in the industry, right? So that once-off thing stopped. But that only went so far. We did not complete the process in terms of broadcasters, in terms of this process of transformation, this terms of empowering the industry. To be quite honest, over the years, it even got really worse, because I then moved from being a broadcaster into the producer space. Create 600 episodes or so of fiction content, Same case, you walk into a market in the Ivory Coast or at MIP in Cannes, and I am, as the producer, who signed the contract that says that double contracts, both broadcasters use it, one that gives me the rights and then takes the rights away from the actor at the same time, right?
Wait, say that again.
So the principle is
that again.
The principle is that, I think René alluded to it, that we sign, there are two agreements when you are commissioned that you sign, right? There's the agreement that you sign with the broadcaster.
Yeah.
And then there's a separate agreement that even each of the individual actors themselves need to sign, right? So I'm saying that I'm taking full responsibility and saying, as a producer, but as well as a broadcaster, there are so important details in the contract that we are able to change. But you change those things if you are able to make the decision, right? And if you really do make the decision. But what I was driving to was to say that after being a producer for several years and then creating 600 episodes, John Kanye, etc., when you go into the international space and you see that content and you know that you signed that contract that says that you will never benefit and the actors will never benefit, I took a decision on that particular day in 2015 to say I'll never produce another minute of content that I do not own. I've become very unpopular in the industry and I continue to be very unpopular for this particular position. I then went and I said, we need to create industry organizations. In the times when you find yourself in Los Angeles, for example, in 2007, and there's a full industry blackout, right? The industry is at a standstill. Why is the Hollywood industry at a standstill? Because the actors have united with the producers. The actors have united with the value chain that affects them. And they're saying to the studios, no.
Okay.
If we do not move, but I just want to conclude to say, the Generations cast was an example of exactly that. I watched the video of the press conference that they had. The one thing that they were speaking about when they were on stage as the 16 of them was the unity that they had. When they said, if you fire one of us, you are firing all of us. That principle is a principle that I believe that does not exist across all of the industry organizations at the moment. And unless we are able to get there, I could conclude how the Americans benefited from that process. We need to get there.
And I guess it's sad that, you know, very little societal solidarity was extended to that unity of that group. Neil, please come in, and I can already see some people itching. I'm going to go to the tweets and I'll come back to you, Adrian and Renee.
Look, I'm 100% behind Lebone, you know, around owning IP, and I know that the IPO, you know, is right now working with IBFC to really put that position very clearly to the Department of Trade and Industry to make sure that you know, intellectual property and owning your rights is a very starting place for empowerment and sustainability across the value chain. And you know, the mindset of South African, you know, the broadcast environment, you know, for a long time has been very hardcore commissioning, where all the rights are owned in perpetuity and across all the channels. And there have been movements to try change those business models in a way where producers can actually, you know, co-own with broadcasters. You know, because for example, the DTI rebate doesn't unlock if a broadcaster is commissioning the content. So if we work together with government to really make sure that the systems are put in place, working together with the IDC, the National Film and Video Foundation, DTI, and DAC, in a way that is collaborative, spearheaded by, for example, DAC in the Film Summit that happened earlier this year. The systems are in place. I think the will is there. It's about changing a mindset around how can we work together where content is produced in a way that benefits everyone down the value chain, where producers are in a position to share, you know, a net profit with actors all the way down the line. You know, and there are mechanisms at SABC, I know that share royalties, but it's such a small trickle down effect where the $1 or $2 grand is coming. So it's insignificant in the bigger scheme of things, you know. So how do we?
But I would think over time it makes a lot of money. I mean, if you
you know, I mean, why would people
Okay.
be? Why would
I'm
people
hearing
be?
no's, yeah, I'm coming back.
Why would people be? I mean, I'm sure there are some star casts out there who are getting money. You know,
I mean,
but
the number of times I've seen Rein Tlokwana on SABC television.
But as a general
his
rule,
family should be rich by now.
General rule, that's not happening. And I think that the way to do that is to really empower producers to own the content so they can have proper negotiations from a position of equal standing with the broadcaster.
Sure. Sorry, Renee, let me bring you in here. And Zikwana, I could see you were itching as well. I'll come back to you and then we'll take Adrian after.
I think I don't want us to move away from why we're here. There's been a lot of discussions going on around rights, producers' rights, broadcasters' rights. That is an ongoing discussion, and it will be an ongoing discussion. We are here about performers, about actors who don't feature in a lot of these discussions. And when I talk to rights, if I give rights to a producer, what's to say that that producer is going to transfer any of that value over to an actor, over to a director of photography, over to an editor? It falls back on the SABC or a broadcaster to say, manage that. And what do we become? We become administrators. I'd like us to, we tend to try and do everything. Let's stick to one thing. Actors should fall under the Department of Arts and Culture. They are part of the cultural industry. An actor doesn't just work in Generations or in Mubango. He can be in a stage performance. They can be in an ad. They can feature in a corporate video. They need to know that they're protected in all those areas. I will only protect them on Mubango or on Generations. The only way to make sure that they are protected in that entire space is to let them be seen as creatives from a creative perspective, like you would look at a piece of art. The Department of Arts and Culture is not here, but they have gone and regulated the sports industry. And because of that regulation, they've made sure that the sports industry transforms. It becomes financially viable because it looks at sportsmen as important. So let's put performers in that same space. They played such an important role when it comes to musicians. We know that over the last couple of years. Let's do that with actors.
Okay.
So that conversation of a performer moves outside of a broadcaster or a producer. It becomes about when that product is exported. It is the face that is the country. They are exporting our country when that voice and that face goes out there.
Renee, I think the point is well made, and I want us to pause there because I'm hearing a lot of and people that are agreeing and disagreeing with you, and we'll take some of those views. Zikwana, just briefly, and then I'll come back to you, Adrian.
It's a vast response because I want to touch on many things that we speak of, but the point. It is exploitative. The nature of this business, because nobody takes accountability. Department of Sports, Arts and Culture refuses to acknowledge. They ignore the artist. However, they will take care of the sportsmen. It's in the same industry. The sportsman can earn $1 million a month. The actor cannot. Department of Sports, Arts and Culture, I visited the Minister of Arts and Culture with 15 other people, throwback 2016, Generation 16. All of this has been in the ears of the minister then. Then new laws were created in 2019. Nobody's implementing them. I heard your question, which is to say to the spokesperson, whose job is it to make sure these regulative laws are implemented? I didn't hear the answer. The reason why I say this is because it is 4 years after the same meeting Usisvathi Swandaka had with the minister. The minister had it with 15 other people. 2016. There is no page we did not turn in 2016. We went to the Saga. Saga said, Sherbet, we are not a union because there are no regulative whatevers that make us a union. We cannot speak on your behalf. We went to the broadcaster, said, show us the exploitation papers.
The clause, yeah.
Because you are selling the show to the whole world. We are the biggest show in the continent. That's why we stood up. Not because we're bored. That's why we made noise. I will go to the other actors standing up with us. That's another page. The exploitation papers came from the channel, but all the numbers were deleted. They were blocked out. We couldn't see how much they sold the show for. Then there's the issues of the producers. And another point that the Saga brought up, which was to say, the reason why we keep on going back to the point of regulations and assistance from the ministry is because the other option is fairness. Imagine working in a multi-billion-dollar industry depending on the fairness of a producer and the fairness of the channel and the fairness of the person that will then sell your content to the rest of the world. Tell me if you wouldn't sit and say, where are you in this? I have weight on my particular back because I repeat, this is not a fresh conversation. Ministry, I can't speak to only channel. I don't want to be speaking about the SABC did this and then the SABC didn't show us these papers. But it was had 5 years ago. And only now something was reported to create this law and whatever. There's a new president now. It was not President Cyril Ramaphosa at the time when we went everywhere. We went everywhere, including the Labor Department, to say, are we laborers? They said no. They kicked us out of, what's the place with the C?
CCMA.
They kicked us out of the CCMA because we said we're going to follow everything, because we had our legal attorneys. We're going to follow everything about this unfair don removal. We quit though. This unfair removal, we're going to go and attest. We are going to do everything. We are going to toothbrush the law to the T. From CCMA, they kicked us out. They said we're no laborers. Tell me that's not a legislative or regulatory problem. The issue cannot only be that actors don't stand together. Of course they're not going to stand together. They are going to be handpicked. That actors who stand and say, please, can you just notice there is a freaking problem in the matrix. I don't. Skim Sam is a great show. Line. But the issue, Ayabonga and my colleagues here and panel, is that.
Jaws, we're not on radio, ne? So let's continue with streaming.
Okay.
Please continue.
So
we'll continue on the other side.
The problem of all problems is that we need to treat a special thing in a special way. To then quote to us what is almost about to happen and we need to start is exactly what the problem is. That is 5 years later and there is nothing that has been done by a producer who called actors monkeys in 2016. Fast forward to a producer who did the same thing to get the actress, and Sis Vatiso pointing out the ill treatment from producers means we are mimicking transformation. There is nothing that's going to come from this talk and this panel that's going to remove the fact that there's a thing that hasn't been done. The thing is taking actors seriously enough to say, there isn't anything we have done to create a thing that's going to make this right.
Okay.
Because it's not this, it's not like any other industry. We're realizing this is a special case that is costing a lot of money. It's not just a, sorry, I know I'm taking long, but it's not just a special case that's special. Okay, look at them, special people. It's a special case that costs money that doesn't trickle down to somebody who's the key player.
All right. I think the point is well made. And Adrian, I think it's good that I'm coming to you now, because a lot of what Zikona is saying is also about, the difficulty that Saga had in responding to the issue in 2016. and your inability to respond. And I think just in your response, if you can engage what Zikwana is saying, but also maybe explain to us why the labor registrar would not.
Well, I'm glad that we also referred to the strike in LA, in Hollywood. The difference between the Generation 16 and the entire industry in Hollywood is that they were protected. We were not. We had no leg to stand on. And I think this is what Saga discussed with you when we did engage on that, is that there's nothing that is actually protecting us. We need to be asking for those protections, which you've just alluded to now. The fact that we cannot unionize, we cannot form any kind of collective bargaining forum, we cannot stand together without being picked off one by snipers. And that means that we should be asking the Department of Arts and Culture to support us in lobbying the Ministry of Labour to recognize that actors are atypical workers, but workers nonetheless. We have some rights that are deserving of, worthy of protecting. Another thing is actors need to be able to be recognized as professionals. I asked a lawyer the other day, who decides what you're allowed, what you charge? She says, no, that's all decided by the Law Society. I said, if we do that among ourselves, we get hit by the Competition Commission. So why is this different? In the medical profession, they have the medical aid societies are talking about tariffs, and that's not anti-competitive. So it seems that there are...
So it seems to me that a lot of what is being said here has to do with how the law, so there's two things. One is that the law is very contradictory in how it views industry bodies. So you can have an industry association for people who build homes, people who are lawyers, people who are engineers, people who are accountants. But it's somehow wrong to have it when you're a performer.
That's correct, because we're independent contractors. We're essentially, by definition, competing with each other. That's how they want us to be. They want us to compete.
The only reason why we must compete with each other because it's an industry that over milks the artists. So it's like we're treated like cows that have a lot of milk.
They're a commodity.
Yeah, we get milked hard to make the billions of rands that directly contribute to the GDP of this nation. We make millions of dollars. We're milked and then we're treated like donkeys. And each time you try and address this in a professional way to a professional and to a person that should speak on your behalf. Because when I'm in the US, I am all of a sudden brand South Africa. But I mean, when I'm in South Africa, I'm slapped across the face for saying, I shall challenge you to take... I cannot be speaking like this in 2019 again to arts and culture.
All right, guys, I want to do this now. I want to maybe bring in some of the people in the cyber world who are part of our conversation here, and some of our guests in our live audience here. Tabiso Matlale on Twitter says, this is really heartbreaking. Now you understand why parents would discourage their kids to go into the arts, and I want us to maybe touch on even the training pipeline, because one would think there's some really hectic things happening in the world of training and getting people into the arts. And Jenny Q says, and with good reason too, I don't blame any parent for wanting to see their child who they struggle to raise thriving like their peers, or at least living up to their potential. Leonard says, I really thought our actors were really taken care of. That's sad looking at the time they spent over the years on our screens, and something really needs to give. Tati, the creative, says, I'm tired of hearing there's no money. Sports is also talent. There's money for sports, but not arts and culture. And somebody please school me on this one. Now, Sasanda, I want to bring you in here because I guess it's easier, as you said, in the world of sports because you're dealing with multi-tiered things here, right? You've got the sports administrators who are coining it and taking their own money and broadcasting rights while being regulated by your department in some form or the other. But then for the sportsmen as well, you also have an agent relationship. And what for me is surprising is that the unions are also involved in the sports. You know, they have a sports union who represents their rights and does all of these things. But yet the big source of the money for me is also the same. It's the broadcasters. A lot of people have been asking here, why is it being treated differently?
First, let me just clarify one thing when it comes to sports, arts and culture. We do know that we have a single minister of sports, arts and culture. However, the full merger of the two departments, being the former Sports and Recreation and Arts and Culture, will only be achieved via promulgation by the President, and that merger will be complete only in March 2020. So I just need to put that there, because right now, we only 2 weeks ago, we were sitting in a strategy session of how this merger is going to be taking place. But I just needed to clarify that. But, you know, when I was going through tangible, real examples of what the input of the then Department of Arts and Culture have been in the drafting of these bills, there was one thing I omitted to mention, and that thing was that in those bills, there's penalties for failure to adhere to the legislative requirements and prescribes of the bills. Introduction of criminal offence for failure to record, submit the records as contemplated by the proposed legislation. So there already, you have some kind of recourse that is available and is being brought about by the amendment of the one bill and the introduction of the other. There's also the establishment of a copyright tribunal. This tribunal will adjudicate any application, referral made to it in terms of this act. I don't want to get too much into that, the legal language, but I'm just trying to answer the question that is posed as to who is going to be responsible for enforcing.
All right.
Look, it is the law. And it is the law. So I don't know how other people want to live.
We got labor inspectors that don't go and inspect.
I know that.
You know,
but,
the laws are there.
I'd like to think that the likes of SABC understand the legal framework with where they operate, and everybody else should. Which means if I'm aggrieved, or if I feel that the law here I have recourse by way of petitioning the courts of this land.
All right, let's pause there. We need to pause there because we need to take a quick spot break. But when I come back, I want to maybe hear some perspectives from some of the thespians in the room, and then I've also got a few people in our audience who might have inputs and insights that they'd like to share. And maybe the other question I want to pose to Asanda, to some of the actors themselves is, you know, this tribunal that we have here. I mean, is that something that would be a perfect grievance resolution mechanism for them? And in so doing, do you go there as an individual or do you go through Adrian's Guild? We're going to ask that question on the other side of this brief break. You are tuned into our dialogue here, bringing it to you from one of our auditoriums here at the public broadcaster, the SABC. It's 23 minutes after 9 p.m. And we'll get another opportunity, I guess, to pick up on some of the policy issues. But I want to maybe use this opportunity to just get some views from our live audience there. And let's try and get some, I know I've got 3 questions or so let's try and get the microphones there. Please be brief. Please tell us your name and then, of course, also your organization.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Kaiser Koza. I'm an attorney around entertainment law. I just want to say the industry is divided. Now, the bill is sitting with the president. the president cannot sign when the industry is divided. That's one thing. And there's red herring around fair use. Because when I speak to other people and I try to advise them to say, the industry is in the better position of both bills being signed. You may not get everything that you want, but leave to fight for another day. There are so many clauses in this that says the minister may make regulations that will tell you what type of contracts that must be there. It talks about economic rights, talks about moral rights, talks about rebroadcasting. You know, if you're not happy with a certain contract, you can then go to the tribunal. Now, you know, I don't want to be the president because you've got an industry that is divided. You, of course, have other people who have taken legal opinions from senior counsel and they've bombarded them to the presidency to say the president may sign because their own interest, and these are production houses. Now, I am appealing to the industry. I've been here for long drafting these laws. I was part of government before I left government. We started with the Copyright Review Commission. There's been so many imbizos. It is in your best interest that we sign the two bills, right? We may not get everything that we want. You may have fears around fair use, but you are better off by lobbying that the president should sign this bill. As to why the industry is divided, I've been trying to ask some of the people that are saying these bills must not be signed. They keep on saying fair use, and I'm saying, what do you understand about fair use? They can't say anything. So, you know, I would appeal to the industry that the current bills are in your favor. If they are assented to and signed by the presidency, it is much more better.
Okay. And as he said, wait, you'll get an opportunity to respond. And as he said, maybe should you be taking the minimum deal and fight another day? I'd love to hear some of the tactical views there. I know the guild there has their view, and I'd like to also hear some of the actors' views, Motlatse and Keke and others. Mhlegazi.
Yeah. My name is Gerald Mavasa. I'm a filmmaker.
Okay.
Like I had pitched for AFP here in SABC, but I got unfair treatment with them because like after pitching, I had to wait more than 4 months to get the result. And then after getting the result, it was something different. The commissioning manager himself was misleading us. Secondly, he held a meeting with our funders behind our back, asking them to pull out of the project, not to fund us, because our unprofessional don't come to him seeking for help. So I want René to answer me that. Is it the police of SABC that Blessed Katillo must go to our funders behind our back to ask them to pull out from the funding the project?
All right, René will respond to that one about Blessed. I don't know who Blessed is, but maybe I'll get some guidance there. There was, okay, so Motlatse, I saw you were smiling there as my brother was talking about.
Look, we need to sign the bill. Right, and we need to unite. And I'm appealing to everybody else. And then we'll fix it one step at a time. Can we just all unite and sign this bill? That's it. That's my parting shot.
Adrian?
I just wanted to say, am I?
You're on.
Yeah. I wanted to say that the industry is divided on the bills. It's in some stakeholders' best interests to keep us divided. There's a lot of misinformation being spread about by very powerful players. If that is to be an excuse for the bills not being signed, let's refer you to the credit amendment bill, where banks were forced to write off debts owed to banks and unsecured loans of up to 50,000 rand. The president signed that bill. I'm sure it wasn't uncontentious. The Film and Publications Amendment Bill, now known as the Internet Censorship Bill, that was pretty contentious. He found it within himself to sign that. So let's show that we're united. Let's not listen to the naysayers and the peddlers of puffery. Fake dissent is being sown. We have to also realize that, yes, the bills will not give us everything we're looking for, but the bills are the first step. The next step is the regulations that are more easily manipulated to tell us how exactly these bills should be interpreted.
Sure. Okay, let me take that question there.
Let me tell you, gives us future-proofing. more than anything else. Otherwise we'll be here tomorrow when another
especially in your relationships with these video-on-demand platforms that are going to be coming out soon, the likes of Netflix and Showmax and many others.
And things we've never heard of.
Exactly. Let me take that question then, Asanda, I'll come back to you. And also, I guess as we try and steer the conversation now more towards some of the solutioning, I'm quite conscious of the fact that this is not the first nor the last conversation we're going to have in this regard. But I think it's helpful for us to be able to take some things from these conversations and be able to take those into many other platforms. And the first I'm hearing here is that, people want the bill signed, but I know Lebone doesn't agree with that. So we'll get to Lebone's view as well. And the SABC, okay.
Okay, good evening.
Evening.
From First Stage Entertainment. I have just 2 points. One, it's obvious that there is no political will to solve the dilemma around the industry. Because it's not for the first time. Many speakers have alluded to that. There's no political will. If there was, the problem could have been solved a long time ago. Moving forward, on the proposed bills, I think if artists were happy, they would have agreed a long time ago to it, irrespective of the divisions within the industry. Those are norms everywhere. The issue of saying push a narrative to take whatever at a given time, it happened in the South African Constitution. We did that. Where are we today? We are regretting that decision. The question is are those bills being workshopped around to all artists, and were they part and parcel of building those kind of bills? Thanks.
Lebone? Oh, sorry. Let me start with you, Mrs. Asada, then I'll come to Lebone.
Look, Minister Mtetwa would be one of the first to admit that the bills in their current form, the language is still very rudimentary. But that should not be a barrier. The bills focus a lot on legal language, and I'm going to quote exactly because, these were his notes. He says, focusing on legal language of which the full understanding of the statute's operation will be done through the relevant regulations. Now, should the President sign them into law, the regulations will be developed in such a manner that any gaps are closed. As government, we will ensure that the drafting of regulations embraces broader consultation with the sector in order to tighten and close all the possible gaps. I also want to just revisit what Zikona raised about whether the sector is viewed and how it is viewed. It was in this year's budget vote speech, where Minister Mtetwa spoke at length about the professionalization of the sector in order to succeed. I didn't mention the things like the debut fund that we've got, the various academies that we founded, including the Kaifas Semenya Academy in Soweto, the Magic Broadcasting Academy in KZN. But really it was in this year's budget. And I didn't mention, Neil knows about it, that we held a very successful film summit at the beginning of the year.
Asanda, can I ask you just something? On the film summit, the schools that you're building and a lot of these support measures, and it's a brief question. Do you not think that some of those initiatives would be put to better use if the industry had the regulation and the professionalization that we're talking about? Because then you would institutionalize them. They wouldn't be, 5 years, this administration does this, the next administration does something else. You would have an institutional structure that says, for instance, how around the mining charter, the mines engage with the Minerals Council. That's institutionalized, irrespective of who's the minister or who's the government, that interaction has to happen. And I'm starting to think that, we're going to speak and hop from one summit to the next and one project to the next if we don't institutionalize.
So that's why I'm mentioning the film summit, because one of the most important outcomes from that was it's what was the plan? I think it's for 5 years, program of action. Absolutely. And that is one of the attempts that are being made to institutionalize. Lastly, I need to speak about this because we're talking about professionalization, and there's been a lot of comparison that's been made with the treatment of sports players and artists. I know of a young boy from Umdingi, a place called Umdingi. If you know Iqonce, King Williamstown.
That's where Makayandini is from, yeah.
He's the young boy I'm talking about.
Okay. I sure put Makaya.
I try not to mention names. This young boy, all he ever wanted was to wear the jersey with the Protea on it. And if you sit down and listen to him, it's his story, and you That was all he wanted, much like the artist who's growing up at Tsomo or Vryheid or wherever, and all they really want is just to exercise their gifting on screen, on theatre stages. This boy was very gifted, but, and we can talk about other, trailblazers, the Tando Mananas, Black Springboks. What you realize is that because they were starting out, the exploitation that they faced back then was something that I look at Gege and how she narrates a story. Those boys back then would narrate a similar story, but what they understood is that sometimes it takes a generation to fix it for the next. Right now, the boys, sorry, I can't call them boys, the men, Omalizole, Mambimbi, do not have the problems that Tando Manana experienced and Soliti Biliga experienced. What I'm trying to say is that, and I hear a lot about the unionizing, organizing. There's an organization, I hate to mention their name, because I find them abominable. The name starts with an A.
It's safe here. AfriForum. Yeah, it's safe here. No, we're safe.
They are, this organization is a non-profit organization, but have you looked at the level of organization that they do? The fact that they can take a piece of legislation and look at it and critique it and from there petition the court to say that. And they're serving a particular interest group, which are Afrikaners. Imagine if the actors would actually do that. It's a non-profit organization, not a union.
Okay.
It's not a union, it's not a guild, but it's a group that is causing nightmares for so many people. Yes, there's that too, but consider that the way the gifting and the way we appreciate the arts, there are people who could probably support you and take these cases.
I think the point is well made. I mean, the irony that isn't lost to me as I come to you, Lebone, is that, if you compare Omagazole Mapimpi in the world of rugby and the first generation Leo Tando, we've had more black people on our screens for much longer than we've had Africans playing in the Springbok team. So it speaks volumes about how slowly we've moved on some of these issues. Lebona, you don't like these bills, man. No, brother. Alongside the SABC.
I think I'm going to be honest and say, it's not that I don't like bills, but these two bills, right? But let's be honest with each other. And fact is, I was part of a team that authored this document that is called the Summit Report. I was part of the team that created the content for the summit, and I will quote to you. It says, a regulatory impact assessment needs to be made on the whole copyright amendment bill by an independent organization to measure the impact on the cultural creative industries. There is a recommendation of the entire film industry that met as a group and through reference groups, like as an industry. This is the recommendation that we put forward. This is the document that has been sitting. We have been through an election.
But so Lebona, it's becoming clear to me that that group
we are not being
might not represent everybody.
Excuse me, sir?
I'm saying it's becoming clear to me that that group, as it came together and gave that kind of recommendation, might not represent everybody, because I'm hearing other people here who are saying something different.
In terms of who was on that group, right? Okay. There are 13 to 15 industry organizations around the audiovisual sector in this country, right? So the IPO was part of that. SASFED was part of that. The directors, the guilds, were part of all of this process. And the final recommendation that was made is captured in black and white here. What has been happening is, I go back to this populist notion of South Africa over the last 10 years, where when something is trending on Twitter, we all follow that trend. We made examples to say, when Akino Motoso's film was taken out of Stekiniko, we had a meeting with the minister, everybody made noise, and then we said we'll get more screens. Nothing happened. When Odwa died on set, we all made noise, it all trended, nothing happened. Ausvatiswa is faced with all the same challenges. We are all making noise again. We are being told that we are the ones that are united. We are the ones that are being divided and I'm sorry to put it this way, by a government that has this principle of concurrent and core competencies that make the SABC not know what to do with relation to ICASA, that make the DAC not to know what to do with the NFVF and all of those corrupt processes. And we've just come out of an era where we've been wounded as a country. We are sitting in an organization that was run by people that were the most corrupt in this country. So for us to be sitting here and to be told that this bill here is ready, when we are very clear of the processes, especially in the last 6 months, after about 10 years of consultation, that all of a sudden railroad this entire thing, industry opinions were not taken into consideration, all of a sudden the thing was in front of the NCOP and it was now sitting in front of the president. And we are now being told, no, you guys are not united. You need to actually just get these two things signed and we will solve them in front.
All right.
What have we solved in front in 24 years? We still have a lot to solve.
Lebona, thank you so much. Renee, you have 2.5 minutes before I go to a break. And then thereafter, I'm getting some views, closing remarks, and of course, a way forward. I thought there was a way forward on the bill, but I guess I giraffed on that one. So maybe let me Renee?
I'm not going to go into the legalities or technicalities of the problems with the bill. My only issue about just signing it is the performers. No, the amendment copyright bill and the performers bill.
So both of them.
Both of them. The issues is that when you start forcing an industry to start using other methods to circumvent bills, you create a bigger problem. So by bringing these in place, you still have the right to contract. So when actors are sitting across from a producer, an experienced producer, and an actor hasn't worked for 2 years, that producer still has the right to say, you can contract and I'll buy you out.
They have more bargaining power.
It doesn't give him any rights. So I think we need to be very clear about what do we want to give people? We want to assign rights to people. What does that right do? That right gives them economic value. How do we get that economic value? Both bills don't answer that economic value. And I think we need to get to the point of what value will this serve? Instead of me just saying, I'm the SABC. You bring that bill in, what am I going to do? The Performance Amendment Bill. You bring it in, I'm going to stop commissioning, I'm going to do a buyout. I'm going to do what Multichoice does. Multichoice buys out. That's their contract. They have a right to buy out. I don't buy out because I still recognize that I'm going to pay repeat fees, I'm going to pay exploitation as much as it's only 1,000 rand. I'm going to do that. But now you bring these bills in and I'm forced to because my business model is still based on something else.
Sure.
So let's look at an industry. Let's say these guys are all freelancers, but they pay skills levy. Every producer pays PAYE and skills levy. Where does that skills levy go
Where's
to?
that training money?
There's a CETA. Now we're saying that you're not covered under the Labour Act, but you're covered under CETAs in terms of the sector, and we pay that skills development levy. Where's the money going?
Let's
All
pause there, Renee.
broadcasters pay. They pay a net revenue to MDDA. Where's that money going to? So there is money. Let's look at it. Let's say where's this money going to? How can we invest it so actors have pension,
Right.
they have all of that.
Okay, let's pause there. We have to take a break, and I think we've also made seemingly a breakthrough. When I come back, KK.
Drama on the field of play and the bench will
And taking some closing remarks now, and I think, Renee, very interesting insights that you're sharing there. MDDA, the CETAs, skills levies. It seems that there's a lot of pockets of money sitting in different parts of the state that should be going to not only professionalizing and regularizing the industry, but actually making the work of the performance art more secure. The fact that akho pensions, akho medical aid, akukho zonke zondo is certainly a big issue. So I'm taking some closing remarks from some of the thespians we have in the room, and then I'll come back to my panel who also assist us with some, I guess, closing and hopefully some line of march around where to next. Keke?
You know what, Ayane, considering what has been said about our profession, with it not being a professional environment, and SARS taking 25% of that. And
that shows
then,
you're a professional.
You know? And then your agent comes there and taxes another 10 to 15%. You really don't have anything to work with. Do you know how emotionally draining it was for one to be in that headspace where you know that you're about to bring life into this world and there is nothing. There's no medical aid. You've been told that you're a brand new artist in this industry, so you cannot go over a certain amount of money, whereas you do equal amount of work as your colleagues. For me, is it about talent, or is it about the amount of years you've been in the industry? So I'm very emotional right now. So
at a loss for words.
I'm really lost for words.
Okay, Mutlatsi. Just some closing remarks, okay? Vatis?
Why are you angry now?
Kumbile.
I'm just going to make an announcement and say something. On Sunday, I think this discussion and this form of dialogue needs to continue on a larger scale. I've asked the MEC's office to host us on Sunday at the Market Theatre. Looking at walking out of there, I want a solution-driven discussion, outcomes-driven discussion, because it's so painful. We can talk here today and say, oh, so-and-so made such a good point. What's going to happen? I'm looking at something, and I said to the MEC's office, I want to walk out of there with us agreeing on certain things, because there's this whole discussion of the bills. I think it's it's holding us back. But I feel, whilst that is going on politically, what can we do in the meantime to protect ourselves and put mechanisms in place to move forward whilst we're still putting the pressure on? I mean, we need that legal framework that's going to support the rights of the actors and everybody else who's involved, so that we can work in harmoniously. You know, that's what I'm looking at. And we don't all have to be shaken and feel like we're enemies. We can make this work together.
Sure.
You know.
So I'm taking some closing remarks then. I saw my brother there in the yellow T-shirt. Brief, very, very brief comment, and then I'll allow my panel to all make, I guess, a 1-minute elevator, closing remarks, solutioning, all of that, you know.
Hello.
Hello, Baba.
I'm Sihle Zwane. Yeah, just a question. I'm still waiting for the answer Mr. Mabasa asked regarding the commission manager, Mr. Blessed Katia.
Okay, sharp. Ngosine. Thanks. Renee will hopefully answer. I saw Renee sneaking in some contact details. They're saying, please email me. So we're taking it offline.
I don't know if you have, I don't know the
Okay, all right. No, thanks. I think, comrades, I'm taking an executive decision here. We're going to take that one offline. Using powers not vested in me. But I was aware of you sharing your details with the gentleman there, so I assume that communication will happen. If you are unhappy with that, then of course I think there are always avenues that are open to you. Lebone, I want you to maybe kick us off with the closing remarks, and then I'll end off with Neil. Sorry, can I just say something briefly? We all have a minute each, and I will cut you off, comrades. I will be Stalinist about it, sorry.
There's a book written by Paulo Freire. It's called Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And in that book, he speaks to the principle of divide and rule. The industry is being intentionally divided. There are people that have benefited for over 10 years for this division and that are continuing to do so. We have a 6-month window to come back into the same room, all of us, and say, what exactly do we want to happen going forward? Instead of creating this situation that is confused. But we need to come together as an industry, not actors, not producers, not broadcasters. We need Mnet in the room. We need ETV in the room. Everybody needs to come in and commit to making sure that this works for all of us.
Awesome. Renee?
I think information is power.
I don't have the answer to everything. The SABC has ways of working. I would propose that there's somebody elected, and I will gladly set up a session to a whole day session with actors. So I take you through how we work, what to look out for, because I think that's very important so that you're all on the same page. My second suggestion is that there is a lot happening. Let's not try and reinvent the wheel. Let's look what is there in terms of money, in terms of policy, in terms of legislation, split it, break it up, and then put it back together.
Okay, I need to take a quick break there, Adrian, before I take you. You will get your minute. This is not me. This is not me now cutting you off. South African Guild of Actors will get the brief minute there. Unfortunately, we need to take a quick break, and when we come back, I take some closing remarks from Adrian, Asanda, and Neil.
October is Truck Month at Ford, and we've
It is indeed, and getting some closing remarks here from my panel in our dialogue looking at the creative and performing industries in our economy. It's certainly one of the most topical debates that are happening, and as I said throughout the conversation, and not the first time this conversation is being had, and I can tell you right now it's not the last time. Adrian, I cut you off there before the break, man. We had to go to ads, but go ahead.
Well, here I am. It was really nice to hear that you agree that knowledge is power. You were explaining earlier how the residuals are distributed from the SABC, but it's from a rule book that only you have access to at this point. We have no other mechanism of accountability. Now, the Copyright Amendment Bill makes provision for collecting societies that are subject to scrutiny. The SABC might be good at a lot of things, but I don't think it is a collecting society. It's like having a game of football where the referee is the only one who has the rules. And on occasion, they can change, and nobody knows. Can you imagine how entertaining? Well, it's good that the sports are now part of the Department of Arts and Culture. Maybe we can learn some things. That's my minute.
Awesome. Asanda.
In closing, I really need to make this point. Government legislates, government regulates. South Africa is one of the few countries where government actually behaves in the way that it does, in the funding that it does. No industry can be sustained by government. Government is not a business. But if you look at the Department of Arts and Culture and the agencies that are being mentioned, NFVF, I believe you received something some point, but we're not going to talk about that right now. Look, between the NFVF, the DTI, the NEF, there is so many funding models, mechanisms in place. In other countries, you bond your house in order to produce a film. We don't have that in South Africa, but it certainly, it certainly isn't. It certainly is not sustainable. But all I'm trying to say is that it says volumes that you have the monies that are set aside through the different agencies that we have to support this, because arts has carried this nation through very tumultuous and painful times. We sang, we watched theatre, protest theatre, and it's in recognition of that you have the support you have today. But we need to start thinking about sustainability.
Okay, and I look forward to being invited to a platform that you bring together as well as the department, where you bring the minister and you bring some of these agencies we've been talking about. You know, I mean, the likes of the MDDA and many others. Neil, let me get your closing remarks. I've got a tweet here specifically for Renee. Somebody saying, hey, Renee, I didn't like what you said. So I'll touch on that, and then we'll get a last remark from one of our live audience guests, and then we'll have to close it off there.
Look, there's been two words that have been used a lot tonight, and that's power and isolation. You know, there's a lot of power imbalances in this industry that I think cause a lot of heartache, you know, across you know, the entire value chain. And power feeds on isolation. Okay, the imbalance feeds on isolation. The best way to fight that is by coming together, to un-isolate yourself, work together with your industry bodies, work together with Saga, work together with the IBFC, work together with the IPO, and so we can come together and be a united voice in presenting, you know, positions to the powers that be, to the stakeholders, that allow us to really move things forward. There's an enormous lot of opportunity out there. There's a lot of different business models that we can activate, but it really means stop the infighting with each other and really come together in a way that that speaks with a voice that is powerful, that is sure of itself, and really holds stakeholders to account for moving this industry forward.
Thank you very much to my panel. Please give them a round of applause before I get to the spicy tweet. So Renee, I've got a tweet here for you, and I must say it's quite a lemon, if I can say that. So Rufilwe Given Mutwane says on Twitter, Renee shouldn't lie about broadcasters paying UIF and the skills development levy, but the SABC doesn't contribute to that. When reporting, they blatantly tell you to remove the line item from your cost report. Pay as you earn comes out from the personnel's line item. Now, my suspicion is that this is someone who's very close in on the action.
But it's law. So, I mean, clearly he needs to go. She. Yeah. You go. I work for the SABC. I have my salary. It's so much. And deducted from my salary is UIF, PAYE, my pension, my skills development levy. Production company works exactly the same. I go and I say the actor in the line item is going to get 25,000 Rand a call. Of that 25,000 Rand, a percentage will go to this and to that. Some producers want to go, take the 25,000 Rand, pay the actor 15,000 Rand, put the 10 in their pockets. On top of that, still want to charge me to pay 25% PAYE, which is not the law. So Rufilwe must follow.
She's also saying here it should be a line item in the budget.
No.
Multichoice, ETV, Viacom allows it on the budget, but the SABC doesn't.
No, it doesn't. Nobody allows it. It's part of your salary. So it all sits.
No, sorry, I'm just saying, like, this shows how the depth of some of the practices that are happening in the industry.
It's there's a law, there's tax law. Anybody wants to understand how tax law works? It's not like
it's not rocket science.
Yes, or top secret, as Adrian said, how the SABC works. I think everybody here has gotten a salary, has worked for a company. There is before tax and after tax. We do exactly the same. We have before tax and we have after tax.
Okay, all right, cool. My brother, you have the fortune of having the last word.
Thank you. First of all, I'd just like to thank Metro FM for giving industry pioneers the platform. And one thing that I would like to state that probably...
Sorry, you didn't tell us.
Oh, I'm VCM, going to repeat. Unfortunately, I differ from the artistry, which is the actors and... I differ from the artistry. I come from the music side, so I would then blend into scoring, the likes of production and music. And I'd like to say that, as you stated as SABC, to create another platform whereby we can now come together with the music side and the media side and protest and come to understanding or build a rule book that will then be followed by everyone because even with music, we're failing. With the DJs on radio, we're also going through the same standards whereby there's a complete misunderstanding of protocol, the way that the Employment Act works. And then again, we're also contractors within, there is no permanent position within the entertainment space, yeah. So I would like to propose to the Department of Arts and Culture to then collaborate with the SABC and build a bigger venue and a bigger platform whereby we can also exercise our rights as artists.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Vusi M. They're finishing us off. That's the tail end of our conversation, and I guess maybe Asandu Shuane homework up that you must now go and find Renee at the SABC, maybe find the minister as well, Sistela. I mean her, yeah, Minister of Communications and the other ministers, and then we must find a venue. But it has to happen. And I think if there's anything we take from this conversation is that the conversation must continue, and the only thing that's going to ensure that people aren't atomized, isolated in the manner that Neil was speaking about is if we organize and we unite. And we begin, I guess, to bring all of the stuff that's been hidden for so long into the light. It might be the payment of that pay-as-you-earn, that UIF, those contracts that we know nothing about where they say, all of this stuff is mine and whatever repeats I sell to whoever belong to whomever. I think it's so important, not only for the purposes of bringing justice to the space, but also ensuring that many of the consumers are not complicit, who watch every single day, the Motlatsis and the Kekas of the world, are not complicit in such a large injustice. Big thank you to my panel, and big thank you to the team at Metro FM. I see Tony Soglo still here. I don't see the big boss, Usbongile Mjali, but big thank you to them for creating the space for us. And until we meet again at the next dialogue, do stay tuned to us here on Metro FM Talk. Mondays through to Thursdays, 7:30 right through to 9 p.m. It's been a pleasure having you. Kweliqonga lethu labantwana bomquba, labantwana benzaga, lamathola nyongande kudlelana, abantwana bakhula ngenembe kaGasityeketyhe bazalwa benamazinyo. Wathi mangutshana ukuthi singayisusa nanini na xa siyibanga. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Under the microscope.
We know nothing as the talent. And this is where it gets tricky for me and confusing when your agent will say, but they don't have a budget. How does an agent know? So you just listen to what you're being told and you go with that. No, Vatiso, take it. Take it because ayikho enye into, so who gets all this information?